Hey folks, John Peterson here from John Peterson Photography, and today I've got another Lightroom quick tip for you. And I want to talk about the tone curve that's in the Develop module of Lightroom. Now, Lightroom has come out with a lot of wonderful updates in the last few months, and every week I seem to discover more and more cool things. Lightroom's really turning from a catalog management tool for me into a developing tool for me. Previously, it was a little too rudimentary and I didn't use it a lot for developing, but more and more and more, I'm relying on Lightroom for a lot of simple edits for my photographs. My more complex stuff, I'll still go to Photoshop. I love Photoshop, but for a lot of real simple images, sometimes I'll just do it in Lightroom. And today's tip is relating to the tone curve. And if you know Photoshop, Lightroom, we have this tone curve and we can see our histogram, and we have a line through our histogram going from lower left to upper right, and we can add an S-curve to it. We can add contrast, we can brighten, we can darken, we can do a lot of cool things with it. But let me show you a wonderful new tip for using the tone curve for developing some of your images, because I just came back from the Palouse and have to do some interesting edits on some of my images to get them where I want them to be. And this really forced me to use more of this feature of the tone curve in some of my images. So let's dive in and take a look, all right? All right, let's jump in. This is the first image I want to show you this new tip or trick, whatever way you want to call it. But this is a shot from the Palouse, and this is taken up on Steptoe Butte, and I'm shooting down on the landscape. And because of the physical distances involved with shots like this, there's a lot of atmospheric haze that happens in the raw files when you get back home. And there's just no way to avoid this in the field. And so I need to get rid of this haze in my processing. And one of the first ways to do that is using our dehaze slider, right? We crank up dehaze and life becomes clearer. It looks really nice. And again, this is personal preference, however far you want to go. But I crank that up to 52, and I have a relatively good starting point to edit this image. But one of the things that I don't like about using that much dehaze is that it adds a blue color cast into the shadows. I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but there's a blue color cast in the shadows. And I want to make that go away. So here's the key tip for this. If I go down to my tone curve and I click on the blue channel here, can you see the colors overlaid on the graph here? I've got blue in the upper left quadrant and yellow in the lower right. So what I can do, if I wanted to, is I can put a point in the middle just as an anchor point, and then in my shadows, I want to drag them towards the yellow to warm them up just a little bit, remove some of that blue color cast. So if I do that and just kind of drag this down a little bit, that blue magically goes away. Look at that. So I went from that to that really quickly. It's a lot more natural of color. That hazy blue overlay is gone. So using this trick with my dehaze slider gives me a great starting point to further edit my images. Similarly, what I could do is add a little bit more yellow and warmth into the highlights. So same sort of trick. I come up here into the highlight section, drag this down, and just warm up those highlights just a smidge. It's a wonderful trick to have. You know, for those of you that have used the color grading panel as well, notice that I could, down here in this circle, I could take my shadows and drag it and warm them up. You know, but this tool is so sensitive that it's really hard to get it just right. And that's kind of why I like using the tone curve instead of the color grading curve. So tone curve. And then the same is true if I needed to remove a different color. If I go to the green channel, I've got green in the upper left and magenta in the lower right. So I could add greens, you know, in my highlights. I could add greens in my shadows, which I don't really want to do. And same with the red. I've got red and aqua, red and green, red and turquoise, whatever you want to call it, the lower right. And I can use this to add color as well. Or if I'm running the full, I select this for all 3 channels. This is RGB, of course. You know, then I can add points along here to do a, if I wanted to do an S-curve and add some contrast. So again, you know, I've got all 3 channels and then individual color channels, and I can add and subtract color as I wish. So let me jump to just one more example of this image. This is down on the Oregon coast along Bandon, and I don't like the amount of blue in some of the highlights, and I wanted to warm the highlights up. So what I'll do is put an anchor point in here, and you see all this information here that's in my lights and highlights area. If I get another point and then I drag this down just a little bit, some of that blue goes away out of the highlights. So, you know, things like in this surf line, up here in the clouds and particularly, those are things that I was looking at as I made that adjustment. And I could cool the shadows in the lower tones if I wanted just a little bit to give it that more weighty, dynamic feel. All right, so there you go. There's a quick tip using the tone curve in Lightroom to add or remove different color combinations in different parts of the image based upon the tonal value. So don't overlook the tonal curve next time you're in there developing one of your images. It can be a nice, easy way to make color adjustments in targeted parts of the image. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Give this a like, do all that kind of fun stuff. Stay tuned for more stuff and have a great day. All right, bye-bye, folks.